And I kind of went, okay, this is a tipping point for me. I could either fall into a pit of despair and go, well, what does that mean? You know, you can't find anything wrong with me. I'm really ill. I'm in a dark room, noise sensitivity, light sensitivity, a stammer, my joints are bleeding, my lungs are hurting, my heart's doing, the list was endless. Or I could go, all right, there's nothing major that they can find. So I'm going to take that as a kind of green flag. I'm not going to get as scared as I was. And I'm going to work on my nervous system because I really feel like I need to calm my body down because it's totally out of control.
The number one thing for me that has been the catalyst for my actual recovering has been finding my tribe, finding a community who are kind, who share. There's a lot of very smart people, resourceful people, people who want to get back to who they were.
This week, I'm talking about the power of regulating your nervous system through gentle movement, breathing, and more. The context is that it can apply to anyone living with chronic illness, and both this week's guests have seen positive effects. Both Sue Holly-Rodway and Suzy Bolt have been living with long COVID. The condition changed both their lives, as you will hear. Through the community Suzy created and her work in the area of dysautonomia, Sue became aware of the importance of understanding how really connecting with her body could help. As you'll hear, Sue and Suzy are now firm friends, and I was grateful to hear them share their experiences. This conversation aims to give hope to others through knowing they're not alone, but also show that tools like movement, breathwork, and more can help to build back their lives and feel better. Please share this episode with anyone you feel might benefit from listening. Welcome, Sue and Suzy, to the podcast. I hope I'm not going to get the names the wrong way around. You would have done that to me to confuse me with S's. So, Suzy, from your work and personal experience in this area, can you tell us what is long COVID and how does it tend to present?
Okay, well, let's go right the way back to 2020. And the term long COVID was actually sort of offered up by the patient community. So it was basically those people for whom they were not basically getting better from a COVID infection that they'd had. And so that terminology just became the way that we as patients, and I was one of those early adopters, were talking about ourselves. We're having a long version of this. And often it was those people who were not extremely or acutely ill with it that went on to develop these longer, more drawn out, very complex sort of manifestations of lots of different symptoms. Essentially, it's the body responding to a threat like the COVID virus, but doing a very big, dramatic response to it where the response just keeps going. The body's kind of immune response just keeps going and lots of different things get triggered. And the symptom set is, well over sort of 200, 300 now, the different possible things that your body could start to do as a response to your exposure to this virus. And so, yes, that's essentially what it is. So a lot of people are very confused because they say, oh, but I wasn't very unwell with it at the beginning. But I got more and more unwell with it as I went through, So I think for me personally, I was probably my most unwell from month 4 onwards. And I think that's probably quite a similar story for many, many people. But yeah, it's lots of different symptoms, lots of different sort of biological responses going on in someone's body that was kicked off at that moment that the virus entered the system. So that's a kind of in a nutshell, I suppose.
And is there any pattern? Have you seen or do people see any sort of pattern in who gets long COVID?
Yes, now we've definitely identified some patterns, and this is not the case for everybody, obviously, but, wherever certain patterns appear, they're kind of a moment of light in a very dark place. So there is definitely a pattern of women versus men. There is a pattern of women between 35 to 55. So that's, very, if you're female in between those age groups, you are tick more likely. Yeah. For people who maybe have some neurodiversity and you're female, that's going to have put you in that tick, tick, tick group. If you've got hypermobility, that's going to kind of be another tick in the box. If you've had any exposure to childhood trauma, or what clinicians would call acute childhood experiences, so early days trauma, maybe it's a capital T trauma event, maybe it's little t, kind of consistent neglect or something, your nervous system will have dysregulated very early on, and that will begin to be showing up as an adult in a nervous system, a body, an immune system that responds more dramatically to something like the COVID virus. And then, there are obviously lots of people for whom those tics do not appear in that way. And then there'll be other things. So there's something called mast cell activation syndrome. And often the tics that we've just talked about will also be ticking this box, but it's having a very, very sensitive immune response. Often people who have MCAS will have had a history of gut dysregulation, asthma, maybe allergies, very extreme hay fever, that kind of thing. And they go on to develop a very overactive mast cell response. So that's basically your mast cells, or your kind of core immune response cells. They'll go to an area of the body and kind of try to defend, but they kind of get a little bit overexcited and they just do it in a much bigger,
carried away.
Right. Yeah. So, those are some of the patterns that are beginning to emerge, and there are others. We could talk about this for a long time, but essentially there's definitely some pattern, but they don't match everyone that presents. So lots to learn.
And I've loved. Can I add something to that? Which
yes, please.
But what I noticed from the people that I've come to know through Suzy's, I'm going to say movement, but program community, is also if you've had a pre-existing viral response to other viruses. So, for example, I had shingles.
Right.
I didn't know that having had shingles was going to make me more vulnerable to long COVID, but it turns out they have a nasty little agreement with each other, and they start to kick each other off, and they set all the things that Suzy's just described, they set them off. And there's this overreaction in your body. There's another one is Epstein-Barr, well known as glandular fever over here, known as other things in other countries. But again, people who've had Epstein-Barr, these are things that tend to continue in your body, but are dormant until something comes along, something nasty and toxic and clever like COVID, and kicks the whole thing off again. And again, your body just goes overreact. So, and what I was going to say is all the things that Suzy's read out, tick, 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 plus the things I've just shared, plus other things, environmental stuff, mold, God knows what else. All those things can conflate to be the perfect storm for your person, for your own body to go, okay, that's enough.
Exactly.
Chronic stress also is a huge, huge contributing factor. Invisible chronic stress, not stress as in I'm stressed, but as in you didn't even know you were stressed. Right. So you add that into the mix. It is this perfect storm scenario. And I'd like to just build a bit on, from my own personal experience, something that Suzy said about the original COVID. Because a lot of people, when they find out I've had long COVID or have got long COVID still, they say, oh, were you in hospital? No, my COVID was mild, as in it was like something between a cold and flu, right? It wasn't nice, but it wasn't awful. I didn't have breathing problems. I didn't have coughing. I didn't have all the respiratory stuff that everybody associates with COVID, and all the medical community at the beginning. If you didn't have in fact, my originally my condition was in my GP notes as respiratory issue. No, I didn't have a respiratory issue. So there is no relationship between the severity of your acute COVID infections and what happens next. And mine kicked in at 3.5 months.
That's what I was just about to ask you. Yes, because obviously Suzy was saying 4 months. So it's interesting, again, similar sort of gap almost. Can I ask you both, did you feel before that 3.5 month point that you were in recovery, if you see what I mean, that like another virus, it was subsiding, or did it stay at a similar level?
Mine went downhill from infection. And I think, mine was a sort of a unique circumstance in comparison to people maybe who tested positive for it in the last few years, because I know I got the virus kind of activated in my body about a week after we went into lockdown. And so if you think about the heightened state that we were all in then,
Mm.
I can remember sitting on my bed and saying, oh my God, I feel really weird, really ill, really weird. And stuff, actually, but I wasn't coughing and I could breathe. And I just thought, well, whatever this is, I think it's COVID because I've never felt this ill in my life. But I must have got away with it because I'm breathing. So, thank goodness. And actually, like, many, many millions of us around the world, I was trying to reinvent my career to get myself online and to push out, some kind of people facing stuff via Zoom and all of that. So I just worked through it, right? I had a virus that was killing people. I'd managed to convince myself that I was fine. I felt really ill, but I was going to be okay. And, I had been self-employed most of my career. And so you just work. That was what you do. You just work because you have to, because otherwise no money comes in. So I just worked. And my body was definitely giving me very big clues. This is not going to go well. And I'd sort of take an afternoon where I go, or I'm going to have a nap, or I'm going to take, I'll hand over. And then I'd get back up and the next day I'd be back on it. And actually combined with the stress of lockdown and all of the stuff that was going on and the kind of homeschooling and the strain in the marriage and all of those things, it was building towards a cliff that I just fell off. So yes, mine deteriorated for sure. But that's not everyone's pattern. That's not
mine's different, right? So for me, so first of all, because I think it's relevant to the conversation, my father died of COVID. Okay. He was a care home.
I'm sorry.
He died in April 2020. So he was one of that, you remember that peak? Remember that moment? I'll never forget that moment because of course it was locked down. So I had all of that. So this whole topic, COVID, everybody was already super sensitized. Everybody was already terrified. For me, it had this extra weight.
Yeah.
So then you fast forward to 2022, which is when I first got COVID because I was so careful. I can't begin to tell you how careful I was for 2 years. When I got COVID, and obviously by then, 2022, you can test. So I knew it was COVID, Omicron. And I was like, okay, stay calm, because I'm not my dad, right? I'm different age, I'm much more healthy, and I know how to look after myself. So I was so proud of what I did. Went to bed, I really looked after myself through the illness. By day 10, I was like, I'm out of here. I have kicked your ass, COVID. Yeah, went back to a very stressful job. I didn't work for myself. I'm a corporate girl, went back to a very stressful job with a toxic boss and punched through, keep going, all the rest of it, stuff going on with the family, same sort of layers and layers of other things going on, right? And unbeknownst to me, while that was going on, things were conspiring inside my body. I always say, I thought I was fine. And I really, I was saying to people, yeah, wow, you can recover, if you do all the right things, God, if you do all the right things. And then the long COVID bus literally came and drove into me. And so, I mean, for me, that started probably, if I'm really honest about it, 2 months after I'd had COVID and thought I was fine and I'd recovered.
Yeah.
And the first clues were weird things starting to happen, like my hearing went weird. Super sensitive, like almost, I now realize, a bit like how some autistic people experience sound in a disturbing way. So that was like, what the hell's that thing? That's not, that's not a temperature, that's not your breathing, that's not, what's that? Because nobody ever tells anybody about the cognitive impact of long COVID. And then bit by bit, and then the fatigue hit, like literally crushingly hit. And then I thought, oh, crikey. So it took a while. And then from there on. So that was my pattern. And I think I heard a quote once, and I can't remember who said it, but somebody said a couple of years ago who'd been through long COVID, they said, if you meet somebody with long COVID, you meet somebody with long COVID. What they meant was every single person who has long COVID has their own version of it.
Yeah.
There are, of course, lots of common things like the fatigue, but we all have our own flavors, right? And literally, because we all have our own neurology, we all have our own metabolism, we all have our own DNAs, gene sets, etc., environment, etc., etc. So why would our our experience and the manifestation be the same? They're not going to be. And that's why it's been so ridiculously difficult to get across from a medical point of view.
Yeah.
Because 200 to 300 different symptoms, all in one go, right? So yeah, I think everybody's story will be slightly different. There'll be some common themes.
Yes.
Punching through is a common theme. I can do this, but is a common theme. You know, now we know, and I know, thanks to Suzy's program, can I just say, and I'm going to keep saying that, I now know that the punching through and being proud of it and thinking you can do all these things is not the right way, and there was
detrimental.
Yeah, was literally the opposite of what I should have been doing. But that's okay. I didn't know. I'm not going to be hard to know about that. No, I didn't know.
Exactly. You live and learn, and we learn through experience. And you know, by educating ourselves, by merely becoming aware that something that part of the way we are behaving, whatever, isn't helping ourselves, and it takes an awful long time to get to that point, because there's a certain honesty with yourself, but also I think a lot of people feel like there's some kind of defeat in that, because there's a huge narrative in society about push, go, success drivers, you know, being the best, going the fastest, all of this. It's a very sort of competitive part of humanity that serves some, and can, in a body that hasn't got any dysregulations, totally calm, so they can tolerate it in a good way. It can be a motivator, a driver. But for lots of other people, 3 of us included, it doesn't work, and it's detrimental. And if we're lucky enough to realize that, then we can start the work to start truly being kind to ourselves and knowing what, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but overused, but being kind to ourselves is something I think we actually then have to learn, because it's not it's not spoken about in as much detail as possible to really understand what that means. So can I ask, but neither of you have had any medical treatment, is that right, specifically for long COVID? Or have you had treatment for some symptoms at all? Or
the only thing that
you go first, Suzy.
So very early on, you know, one of my most crushing symptoms that obviously kind of turned the volume up on all of the other things that was going on was my inability to sleep, because my nervous system was so dysregulated. And that week in, week out became paralyzing. I became obsessed with it, as you might imagine, right? I'm sure anyone that's listening understands that space. And actually what happened was my doctor said, we tried sleeping tablets, didn't touch the sides. And he said, look, there's something that we give some of the elderly, and it's a really drowsy antihistamine. It just kind of knocks you out. Should we try that? So he tried me on promethazine, which is a very, very drowsy antihistamine, but a very strong dose of it. And it was the first point that I actually slept for 4 hours in weeks and weeks and weeks. And the other thing that began to happen was I felt like the fire that had been raging inside my body went out. And I called him the next day and went, whatever you've given me, I think antihistamines is a really key player. Something has changed inside my body. And now one of the things that was happening at the same time was other people were beginning to experiment with stabilizing the mast cells using antihistamines. And I was in obviously support groups at that time, and occasionally someone else would say, oh my goodness, have you tried an antihistamine? Because actually this is beginning to happen. So very low hanging fruit, but very early on, I luckily tried it, and then started to talk about it with the people that I'd connected with, and went, you know what, it's so easy. You could get your hands on it today. Try it, just try it, see what happens. It is now, I think, one of the most common pieces of people's protocol. So there isn't anything big out there that is a silver bullet for everyone. There's lots of different things that I've seen over the years, people trying, some really helpful, some not so. Some help some people, some don't touch the sides for others. That's the kind of slippery world that people are working in. There isn't a take this medicine and it will make a difference for you. There is this person took this medicine and it made a difference for them. Oh, but you tried it and it made you worse. So
Yes.
this is a really difficult space to navigate when you're a patient, because you're desperate to try something, but there isn't a one size fits all process with this.
No
so it's
panacea. Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. And
So
I
what
mean,
about you?
I'll build on that in that. So I think a feature of being in the world of long COVID still now is that there is no one agreed protocol for treatment. There is no treatment recovery path agreed by the medical community, either in one country or in several countries. Different countries offer different things. If you are lucky enough to be in a country that for example, supports naturopaths and integrated treatment and holistic medicine, then you may be more likely to for people to have looked in the round at how to help you. We don't have that type of system in this country. So if you go, I don't think my story is untypical. I go to my GP. I know more than she does, or they do. That's not me being arrogant. It's a fact. I've spent 2.5, nearly 3 years researching and being part of support groups who've been researched. So there's this huge, 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 huge world of lots of intelligent people, lots of people who want to get better, desperately trying to find answers. And we all try things. And as Suzy said, what might work for one person might not work for another. Go back to what I said earlier. All of our physiology is completely different. Our metabolisms are completely different. Our neurology, our chemistry is different.
Yeah.
So why would one thing work for everybody? But so what that leads to when you don't have anything being offered over, the counter or at the GP meeting, is you start to try things yourself. Everyone is self-medicating. Everyone is whether that's self-medication with wonderful things like mindfulness and breathing exercises, or whether that's with pills and potions. Everyone is trying stuff. I went with antihistamines because I heard from actually, the Suzy's community that it was working for some people, and which ones to try in the UK, because again, every country has different things. And for a long while in my illness, it really helped. It helped a bit because I was getting a huge histamine reaction. By the way, I now realise a history of histamine overreaction. Actually, in my case, to bites. If I get bitten, I'm in A&E. So, and not as in I need an EpiPen, but as in, I get really bad reactions. So I hadn't thought, you don't add all these things up together. Why would having bad bite reactions have you have a weird, experience of long COVID? So I tried antihistamines. I've tried various different things over time. I took melatonin for my sleep because I'd done so much international travel with my job. Melatonin was a thing I always used to take for jet lag, well, to deal with jet lag, to not have jet lag. So I thought, I'd still got, stuff from America because, of course, over here it's hard to get. And that helped me through my sleep challenges. I came off it as soon as I could because I don't want to be reliant on anything medically, chemically. So, but I think everyone tries different things, Wendy. And
and
it's dangerous, actually.
And so prior to getting long COVID, Sue, we met through Sian Richardson, who is the Blue Tits
Chief
founder.
Tit.
She's the chief tit of the Blue Tits. And so she's been on the podcast I think she was number 3 of my whole series. It kindly came on and she connected us. And so you love cold water swimming, as do I. It's a mutual interest. See behind her, as you can see if you're watching a video. But prior to that, you were an avid hockey player. Is that right?
I was. I competed very keenly for, I think it's about 35 years. I took hockey very seriously. Never made national level, but hey ho, you can still be competitive and take it seriously. Loved competitive sport. I realise now it was a very good channel for stress. You only realise that when you stop. Yeah. I then got into doing charity running and stuff like that. I think a bit like you, Wendy, I built it up over time. I started off doing fun runs, race for life. And then, got as far as a half marathon until I realised that I wasn't really constructed for that sort of distance, which again, you realise from your own story. And then, but I was prior to this illness, very active. I'm very lucky. I've got my own home gym, with all the cardiovascular equipment in it. Cardiovascular was my thing. and I was really, really fit. And and so you don't expect to be crushed by anything, actually.
No.
And I'd never experienced fatigue, by the way. I think that's another thing I say to a lot of people is don't think you know what fatigue is unless you've had fatigue.
Until you know it,
because tiredness doesn't even, to Suzy's term earlier, touch the sides. It's not the same.
To me, it's like when people say, "Oh, I've had a touch of the flu," and I always think, "No, until you've had flu, you've just had a cold. You've not had flu, because if you have flu, you are floored by flu. That's real flu." And it is people do use terms interchangeably and so on, and you're right, but the problem, you and I were discussing it, Sue, before we came on, was the problem is that it's a hidden condition where, like so many, really, there's very few things actually, that conditions that people live with that are visible. It's the broken leg or the skin condition or something. There's actually very few. Most conditions really to do with pain, mental pain, physical pain, are invisible. So it's really, really difficult to express exactly how you feel, but also for someone around you, even when they love you so much and know you so well, to really know what you're going through truly. And they can see a glint that's not there in your eye, but they can't, they still can't go, "Oh, you're probably a 7 out of 10 today." You just can't see that. And that's the hardest thing, because then, as from, we've talked about, prior to this, from my experience, then you feel a little bit powerless. And also in my condition, I felt like was I making it up? Was it just all made up in my head? And did anyone really believe me? And I never found a community. I never found this. It was actually only once I recovered through an awful lot of hard work in lots of ways that I then started to find a community. And interestingly on that, it was because I wasn't on social media as well. So there's an awful lot of poo-pooing of social media. And yes, I think it's really got its faults. But then when I decided to start moving into this world and got on social media, a whole world opened up to me of information and support that I kind of think, had I maybe it would have been different. There's no point going there. But anyway, sorry. And aside, Suzy, and I was going to come on to the fact that you, prior to your having COVID, was you were and still are a yoga teacher. So you've always been a mover.
Oh, so I did a degree in performing arts and was a dancer and choreographer by major, and moved into theatre, but then moved into, after about 5, 6, 7 years, moved into corporate training. But in the middle of that year, so in my mid-20s, I trained as an Iyengar yoga teacher because I was obsessed with the kind of structure and the learning about the human body and the kind of transformation piece, because I'd been a dancer and I wanted to kind of help myself, because dance isn't a particularly healthy thing. when at that level, you're asked to go to extremes. So, I wanted to do something that was good for me, and I fell in love with yoga. And prior to getting COVID 2020, I was actually boxing. I'd introduced boxing into this kind of yogic space that I'd inhabited for so long, and was having a complete kind of revolution of my own kind of emotional well-being, because I realized as well, you can use yoga as a kind of felt blanket actually on a lot of emotion, and I'd had probably a very, very stressful decade. My marriage had been falling apart for a really long time, and I'd used my yoga practice to kind of crush everything under the rug, so to speak. And actually it wasn't until I'd started boxing and I started to go, oh my God, I'm really angry. And I was just having this incredible time kind of punching the heck out of, my trainer. And then it was very therapeutic, I have to say. If anyone's listening to this and they're kind of, oh, I'm really into yoga and I use it to manage stress, you can only use it to manage stress for so long. Then you've got to get the stress out, right?
Then you're going to go and punch something. Okay.
I had to hit really hard, because I swear to goodness, it changed my life. But so, prior to, March 2020, I was in the gym 3 times a week. I was boxing. I was getting ready to consider sparring. I've got my helmet sorted. I was kind of like, I am going for this. Yoga teacher goes crazy. And then I got sick. So, yeah, I was a bonfire waiting to happen. Basically, my nervous system was exhausted. So it doesn't surprise me. And I'd also had glandular fever as an 18-year-old. So I had a pre-existing imprint in my system, right? With that kind of, autoimmune issues. Here we go. Let's just store that one in the bank of Suzy. So
Yeah.
I think it's really easy for us in society because, let's look at social media. Fitness looks like thinness and being able to run far, or, being able to lift weights. But actually, if you look at health can be quite different to fitness. So I was fit, but I wasn't necessarily healthy.
You weren't fit for life.
Right, exactly. My nervous system was not fitting well. My physical body was great, but no, the rest, no.
So let's talk nervous system, because you this is now your specialist area, Suzy, because you've done so much work in this area, and your understanding of the connection about up and down regulation and how incredibly important that is for, I want to say, all chronic conditions, but I also want to actually open that out to the human race.
Right.
Let's go big.
To anyone that calls himself human. I think, it's actually that broad.
Exactly.
Right.
Anyone who has a nervous system.
Yeah.
That they know about. Maybe there's some that don't, but I'm pretty sure they all do. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10 minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love. So can you just tell us a bit, Suzy, about your work and the community that you've built? And then Sue, feel free to chip in because you're a member of that community and you're obviously on the receiving end.
Yeah.
And you can talk about what that's done for you. But Suzy, if you can kick off.
Yeah, sure. So, let's just backtrack again to 2020, because this is when I really kind of started to go, oh my goodness, okay, something needs to be done because there's nothing right now. So I got super sick around, month 3, went into hospital. They did all the tests that you can. We're going to test you for cancer. We're going to test you for, inflammation. We're going to test you. Blah, blah, and they came back and went, there's nothing that we can find that we can treat you with. So you're going to have to go away now. And, they were like, yeah, we can see that you're really not well, but there's nothing. And so actually I said to one of the consultants there, I said, is this autonomic nervous system? And he went, maybe. And I went, it feels to me like it's all of the things connected to my fight, flight, freeze response. They're all going a bit crazy. And he went, yeah, maybe. And that was kind of as much medical advice as I had at that point.
And maybe at that point you were actually telling him.
I was a little ahead of the curve. Yeah. I haven't many GPs, you say the word dysautonomia to them and they go, what's that? It's not until you get to specialist level that is even talked about. So let's just pause that for a moment. So backtrack. I come out of hospital. I wasn't in there long, but long enough to be given an all clear from what we could or couldn't find. And I kind of went, okay, this is a tipping point for me. I could either fall into a pit of despair and go, well, what does that mean? You can't find anything wrong with me. I'm really ill. I'm in a dark room, noise sensitivity, light sensitivity, a stammer, my joints are bleeding, my lungs are hurting, my heart's doing, the list was endless. Or I could go, all right, so there's nothing major that they can find. So I'm going to take that as a kind of green flag. I'm not going to get as scared as I was. And I'm going to work on my nervous system because I really feel like I need to calm my body down because it's totally out of control. So I was in social media groups at the time where people were sharing that people that they loved had died. You know, my brother's died, my child's died, my wife's died. You know, and the symptoms and the fear, it was off the scale,
Mm.
as you can imagine. Back in 2020, there was no one knew what was going on at all, and I kind of normalized what was going on for me in there, because symptom sharing, oh, that's going on for that person too. And all those people are talking about, okay, this is part of this piece. So I'm going to just put myself in that club and go, this is not unique to me. That for me always feels reassuring. If there's
Yeah,
20 people this is happening for, that's great.
absolutely.
I love that. I love it when it's mass. Then it's not unique to me. So that was when I went, but I can't stay here in these groups because I'm picking up on global grief right now. And that was
Yeah.
so heavy. I felt it, you know, and I'm by nature very empathic, very sensitive. I have ADHD, and that's been a part of my diagnosis, part of my recovery, getting that diagnosed. And I just went, oh my God, I need to set up my own little sanctuary. So I set up my own little Facebook group and went, I'm going to be over here talking about things that we can do. I've been a coach, and, you know, I've done counseling training. I've been teaching yoga for 25 years. I'm just going to like give us some positive affirmations and
Let's
some
be positive.
practices. And I'm just going to remind us that, you know, hey, we're the lucky ones. We're not dying. And, you know, how about we just do something every day that's nice, that's going to be good for our nervous systems, and see if that makes a difference. And we'll share tips, and we'll share what happens when you took an antihistamine, and we'll share, you know, and I can remember 100 people at the beginning, and we kind of went, oh, look, there's 100 people that want to do something positive for themselves and not just sit in this pit of darkness going, we're all doomed. And I think there's a really big place for that time. And I sat there for a while too, but then I went, get me out of here, because it's going to make me even more ill. So it grew. And I have this lovely community online where people come in and share, you know, I found a meditation on YouTube that's really calming, or, hey, listen to this healing music. It's actually really restful for your nervous system. Or here's a meditation. Here's a gentle yoga practice. And actually all of it began to be really helpful. People started to go, oh gosh, actually this is really nice. I love this group. I feel so much better when I'm acting in this group rather than some of the others. And then by September 2020, there was enough people, and I just said, look, I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of well enough to maybe to teach a couple of classes. So would anyone want to join us live? Should we do a little live thing? And enough people said, yes, let's get together live. Wouldn't that be nice? We could actually talk to each other. So when I say live, I'm talking Zoom live, obviously not in
Yeah.
person. I was still only just able to go up and down the stairs in my house. And so we had this kind of group of about 15, 20 of us just going, okay, how's everyone doing? Check in, you know, what have you taken? Who's seen a doctor? Has anyone like what, if anything, is anyone doing or getting or learning about this? And the community grew, the classes grew. So then I went, oh, let's put mindfulness on. And I knew someone that we could do. So I got mindfulness on. And then, oh, I think the autonomic nervous system's really, really easy to kind of hack into if we use breath work. So let's just get some breath work specific teachers in. So this community grew, and the more it grew, the more people came, the more I could grow it. So I started to provide a big timetable of classes for people just like me. And, you know, in the early stages, I needed it as much as everyone else. But the act of doing it, the act of saying to myself 2-3 times a week, you've got to move really gently for your body. You're going to co-regulate with other people on a Zoom call. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You're going to share stories. You're going to come away feeling validated, listened to, heard, acknowledged. And I went, oh my God, that's actually helping me get better.
Yeah.
And it's helping them get better. And then people started to talk to their doctors that were finally talking to them, and talking to cardiologists and going, we're doing these classes with this woman. And she's kind of helping everyone get better. And I found her on social media. And that was the point at which an amazing cardiologist heard about me through some of his patients. And he was a specialist in the holy grail of dysautonomia. And that was when things really started to make sense, kind of clinically, medically, from a kind of, you know, recognized Western medical perspective. Here we've got one of the UK's top cardiologists going, what she's doing is what you need to do. If dysautonomia, which is a big piece for many people, not everyone, but for many people, if dysautonomia is how your body is kind of responding to this, this is the way out. And you might need a heart med just to kind of regulate palpitations, but actually that work is the work. And so
So
having
can I just interject there,
yeah,
and just to say, so just while you're on it, so for those who have dysautonomia, so what does that exactly look like? So if you had to describe exactly that, how does that feel? Because that's the piece where people need to recognize it in themselves,
yes,
both for, oh, that's how I can maybe get myself better if I have long COVID, or I'm on the way to something happening in my life potentially because I'm ignoring the fact that I have it.
yes. Okay. So while I remember, because I might forget, the Dysautonomia Project is a website
Okay,
on
perfect.
online, which is just awesome. And it's American based and they've got loads of info there. So definitely go check there.
Let's link that in the show notes.
Exactly. And I would say for many people, and again, not everyone, but for many people, dysautonomia will show up as a form of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, it's called. And that means you get dizzy. You get dizzy on standing, really dehydrated. Your blood pressure can be very, very low. Basically, when you stand up, when you move, the body goes, no, go sit back down again. Don't like this. Don't like this. And you can feel nauseous and you can get migraines and all sorts of other things. So that's one of the kind of key sort of ways that it shows up. But it will also show up in all sorts of other ways, like shortness of breath. So if we think about the autonomic nervous system, that is the system that runs all of the things that happen out of our kind of decision making. So
Subconscious.
subconscious, yeah. So, out of our control, but actually we can control it by that one routine, which is by slowing down our breath. So being aware of how we're breathing, because our breathing rate is dictated by the autonomic nervous system. So we all know that we can hold our breath and we can change how we breathe. I can't hold my heartbeat or change how my heart does its thing, but I can definitely influence the speed of it by slowing my breathing down. So beginning to learn about all of that stuff was really interesting. And many, many, many people, if not probably everyone that gets a long COVID diagnosis will have at some point a dysregulated breathing pattern. So that's probably one of the most common things. And the thing that's so weird for many people to get their head around is they say things like, how can I be this ill? And you're just telling me to breathe better. Are you crazy? It's like, actually, when you understand the science of this, the breath is a way to help. So, changing how you breathe, getting the body to learn how to rebreathe, because it gets stuck in that kind of short panic breath. And everything changes the body when we breathe differently. So many different things are affected by that. But it's a really deep learning curve for people. And it takes a lot of people a long time because they're looking for the drug. It's like, don't talk to me about yoga. Don't talk to me about breathing. For God's sake, I'm really ill.
Where's the pill?
Time for this. Give me the drugs because I'm in pain. I need things to change quickly. And I don't like this. And I want to be done. So.
And we've been educated as we've grown up to always look to the medical community to help us. Yeah, and that seems fair in lots of ways. Better knowledge, better understanding, training, hundreds of years of history, but I think we have to come to the point that we realize that we shouldn't put so much pressure on the medical world. They're only moving so fast. That is all based on lots of people's evidence brought together. But to get the research required to look at big enough groups is incredibly expensive and difficult. It's a whole massive vehicle in itself. And actually, when it comes down to it, we have to advocate for ourselves to learn about what's happening to ourselves by reaching out, by finding the people, by making the connections that can suddenly bring those light bulbs that go ping and help us to know ourselves better.
Exactly. And they might not be validated by Western medical practitioners because
not necessarily.
they're taught that something is only real if you can test for its efficacy, and therein lies the kind of problem, I think, with much of our kind of culture around medicine. If it's so pharmacologically based, you should be able to test for something, and then you should be able to treat it, and it's a testable treatment. But actually, the work around dysautonomia is so difficult to test for, which is why I think I discovered that they spend something like 45 minutes on it in medical school training. So we have to forgive our doctors, but they don't know about it because the time spent educating them and covering it, because it's almost impossible to test for. So therefore, they just kind of don't touch it, which is really sad. And I think the pandemic will have definitely been changing some of those discussions, but it's definitely something we're not going to see the kind of benefit of for at least another 10 years, I think.
But thankfully, the lifestyle medicine, holistic medicine, alternative, whatever the words you want to put to describe it, is really growing in people's awareness, people's understanding of how important that is. The longevity fascination that's come about recently, and so on. But it all still comes back down to living healthily in a way that's more in tune with you, and learning about what ticks the boxes for you that makes you feel better, sleep better, what makes you happier, what makes you have better relationships with people, and sort of trusting that we have the power within ourselves. We have a lot of knowledge, even if we're not trained medical people, or we haven't had lots of influence from the Eastern medical. You don't need to know that, but our gut, as we like to call it, tells us so much if we can really, truly be honest with ourselves. And I think it's so easy to not be honest with yourself, because we all want to battle on, do the things we're supposed to. And quite frankly, life has got busier and busier and busier. And with all the wonderful advances in technology and so on that are allowing us to speak today, that have allowed us to meet at all and connect, they still are also bringing issues that we have to become aware of, so that we can make choices, not so that we can push it all behind and pretend it's, stick our head on a blanket, but so that we know what we can choose in our lives, and also then educate our kids about what could be beneficial or not, and helping them to see our view on life that it's taken us decades to develop.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, that was a bit, I just went on one.
Can I add something in before we go back to the amazing thing that Suzy has done?
Yes.
And I know she doesn't like, Suzy, she doesn't like Suzy. She knows, I know it's a community. I know there's a whole villages and villages of people that are part of the Suzy Bolt community. But I just want to go back to a couple of things. One is what the big speech you just gave. For me, it's about learning to listen to your body, listening. We've lost what we had thousands of years ago, which was we listened to our bodies. And that's because we weren't being bombarded with all the other noise, right?
Yeah.
So listening to your body, I think, is absolutely critical to the holistic answer to being well. I think the second thing is when you have long COVID and, for example, dysautonomia, which I had that label stuck on me by my long COVID clinic. They don't like to call themselves the long COVID clinic. They call themselves the post-COVID syndrome service. But after they listened to me explaining my symptoms, they said, "Oh yeah, dysautonomia." And I said, "Oh, good, you've got a label, right? So where's my pill?" Oh no, we don't know how to deal with it. There's no answers, but that's your label. Now, I didn't have POTS, but I had tachycardia. I had the most healthy, amazing sporting heart all my life. Really low resting heart rate, great recovery time, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd never had tachycardia in my life. And then all of a sudden I could be asleep and I'd wake up. And Suzy knows all about that. And, many, many people in the long COVID community know about tachycardia and breathing issues and the relationship between the two. And it wasn't until I encountered the teachings from Suzy's world that I realised how I could manage it down. I could find a way to handle the tachycardia, not least of which the fear, because
that's the most important piece, right? That's it. you know, one of the
Yeah,
things that
fear.
we spend so much time doing is trying to help people go, you know what? The most important thing you need to know about that symptom right now is that it's not killing you. And it's
Yeah,
not, you know,
yeah,
and it's a really normal part of this, and it will pass. And you just
Yeah.
need company whilst you're riding the wave of it, and it's going to push through, and you're going to move through it, and it'll be okay.
The most powerful moment for me was when I had a scan finally after 3 years, and she said, "There's nothing structurally wrong with you." And that was a moment of, great, there's nothing wrong, great.
But then,
But not so great, because I'm still in lots of pain and I have absolutely no explanation. But the one gift that she did give me was, she said, so when you are moving and it feels like you're potentially going to get into pain, you're going to have a flare up,
mm,
you're not damaging yourself. And
yeah,
it's a different scenario to what you're talking about. It's very structural, but it gave me permission to
yeah,
move again.
right,
And I started to lean into that discomfort and sometimes pain, but I did it in a different way. I started to be kinder to myself,
mm,
and actually think, yeah, I can move more and I can deal with the flare ups, and I can see that things are progressing in the
right.
right way. And it is that
So
it's
important.
getting rid of that
Mm,
fear and
mm,
giving yourself the permission.
mm.
Um, yeah. Suzy, tell me a bit more about the specific work that you do in terms of classes and so on, because on our conversations before, you talked about how people are quite amused by the level of movement,
Yeah,
particularly that you start with.
yeah,
And I really want to lean into that, because
mm,
often I think that's one of the biggest symptoms of a fast-paced,
yeah,
highly dysregulated system, is that the person perhaps cannot see the benefit of pulling it right back. So please talk
right.
a bit about that.
And I think, so it does make me laugh, because the level of movement that we want people to start with when they're ready to even begin moving, and obviously there'll be a bit. So we have what we call, our level 0 to 3. We kind of go up to level 4, but 0 is you join us from bed, because that's all you can do, and we're just there for company. And quite a lot of the sessions are doable from your bed, and they're there to kind of just expose people to a live experience, which is super important when you're lonely, isolated, you haven't left your house for ages, right? So we have
Mm.
level 0, and then we have your level 1. And level 1 is when you might be able to do a tiny bit of movement, but when you're kind of relearning to move safely after a very extreme illness experience, you've got to do so little, because you need to resensitize the body to movement. So it might be you raise an arm and you put it down again, or it might be that you just squeeze the muscles in your bum and do a little bit of a right, left, and then you're done. I bet everyone did that right just now. They're both nodding if you're listening. And then, and then we might do a kind of, okay, you're gonna do a little movement with your arms from side to side, and people are like, are you having a laugh? And we go, actually, yes, we do. Make sure that you have a laugh as well. So you're distracted from the part of your brain that wants you to do that 20 times, because more is better. Because we've been programmed, we've been conditioned, go to the gym, work hard, sweat, do 10 more than you know that you're physically capable of. Then you've done your job. And actually, all of that needs to be kind of ripped up and thrown out the window. So we get a lot of people who, and we kind of reiterate it every single class. And I'm talking about 2 classes in particular that myself and my co-teacher Ross Cooper teach, and they're called the Rest, Repair, Recover classes. There's some movement, and we'll cover things like bridge and little knee lifts and opposition balance and things, but we break it down into these tiny versions where level 0 will be, okay, if you're level 0, you're just going to squeeze and release this muscle. If you're level 1, you're going to do this tiny bit of movement just twice. If you're level 2, you're going to do more reps and add in this. And if you're level 3, but we don't even show level 2 and 3 unless people ask, because we know someone new will start and go, oh, well, I'm just going to do level 2. I'm just going to do it, because I really haven't done any movement. I haven't exercised, and the muscles in my bum are getting a bit soft, and I don't like that. So I'm just going to do it. And so, we're calling people out all the time. We're watching you. If you're doing this, you're not helping yourself. Just come back to the beginning. You've got to think about everything. You might need to have a shower today as well. And we know that's exhausting. If you've got not much energy in the tank, you might need to go to the shop later. If you're actually lucky enough to get out the house, you've got to factor the whole thing in. So we get people to just do this really tiny bit of movement. And the amount of people that go, I did not know that was even an option. I didn't even know that was a thing, that you were even going to call that a thing. That was just like lying on the couch and having a wiggle of my legs. Yep, that's all we want you to do at the beginning.
But so to ask about the sort of science behind it, not really wanting to use that word, but so the link in it, is that you helping them connect back with the sort of inside of their body, as it were, helping their brain connect back to their body and make them feel?
Well, there's a little bit more to it actually than that. So what we know is when the brain, and obviously the brain is the body is the brain, when the brain is experiencing something that feels like too much, it shuts down the system, right? So it's a bit like when there's a fault with your car. So my old car used to go onto go slow mode, and it would only let me drive at 30 miles an hour. It's essentially the same kind of thing. We call it post-exertional malaise, PEM. So when you're asking the body to do too much, or indeed it can be emotional, or it could be cognitive. You might spend, 3 hours trying to do work emails, and your body just shuts you down. It says there's too much, I can't cope. Yeah. So with movement, we do a tiny bit so that we kind of sneak in under the threat system, the alert system, your amygdala, your insula, which are scanning all the time for, are you doing too much? And are you putting me under threat? I've been very ill and we're not doing that again. And if you expose me to something that's too much for me, I'm going to shut you down. So what I talk about is coming in under the radar with something so small that actually the body doesn't really register that it's movement, which is why it has to be small for it to begin with. Okay. And then you build up tolerance to it. What we're also doing, particularly in these 2 classes on our timetable, we're also chatting. And we use the group chat in the Zoom chat box, and there's always jokes. We celebrate International Day of the Carrot, or International Day of the Female Orgasm, or whatever it is. It was International Day of French Toast today. So, we're always having some random conversation, because actually what we're doing is we're taking people's focus away from, is this movement going to be too much for me? And we're taking it to, hang on, I'm moving my arm, but we're talking about French toast, and we're talking about the fact that Suzy's yoga studio's got an infestation of fruit flies, and she's just got up and put a crab costume on. Like, what the actual hell is going on? And so what we find is that people experience the classes on such a joyous level, and they've laughed a lot all the way through, that their bodies then don't go, oh, you did exercise, didn't you? That was bad. Yeah. I'm going to shut you down. And as long as they stick with our protocol and keep it really small and really gentle, you begin to be able very slowly to tolerate more. So we're kind of taking the fear out completely by talking about French toast and carrots and fruit flies. Admittedly, that changes day to day, so don't come looking for that as a content, guys. But, we have fun and we laugh a lot, and that distracts. It distracts the body from the overdoing it fear.
Yeah. Sue, tell us about your experience of the community.
Well, I'm just let's start at where we've just finished with Suzy there, and then I can go backwards to some things I wanted to say. But the whole thing about so what I'm going to say from my experience is, one of the things I loved about the offerings, was that you could do on demand. So nearly all of these classes, are accessible after the event. Right now, for me, that was important because I didn't really feel ready for live. Everyone's got their own, time that it's right, that they feel okay with live. I sort of was, and I think I was sort of dipping my toe into, is this going to work for me? I don't really know. And I don't want to be like, I just didn't want other people around. I just felt that was too much for me at the time. So I want to say that even when you access these classes after the event so they're recorded, on demand, you still get the full benefit of the joy, the silliness, because they're reading out, because Ross
You
and
just
Susie,
laugh along.
yeah, are reading out all the stupidness, and and you still see them in the costumes, or hear whatever the topic is after the event. It's still, and you can imagine, even though I can't visualize, I've got that thing where I can't visualize. That there are all these other people in little boxes all laughing and all there, and that for me, that comes to this thing about connection. The number one thing for me that has been, I think, the catalyst for my actual recovering has been finding my tribe, finding a community who are kind, who share, who, I think we're an incredibly smart community, Suzy. There's a lot of very smart people, resourceful people who want to get back to who they were. Main thing is, though, we all get each other. Because, on a scale from I'm still in bed, 3 or 4 years on, I've never been bedbound, but for a while I was housebound. And everything in between, and the good days and the bad days, the good hours and the bad hours, everyone understands it. And that's true empathy, because you've been inside it yourself. And so, and once you've been in that awful place, which is incredibly isolating, go back to your invisible illness thing. It's such an isolating experience that, and particularly in 2020, nobody would have understood. Even in 2024, here we are, very few people understand unless they're inside it. Finding your tribe, finding your connection, finding a community, finding others, just is healing. That in of itself is healing. Second piece, Suzy and Suzy's tribes, it's all about joy. It's all about joy. Now, I happen to be someone who was joyful about joy all my life. Joy was like a thing. I like joy. I like silliness. I'm very gregarious. Joy's great.
I like joy.
I like joy.
Joy's great.
And I had a real deficit of joy, in all honesty, since my dad died.
Yeah.
Not just because it was all about my dad. I had a very difficult relationship with my dad, as it turns out, but it was more the whole pandemic, all the heaviness, heavy. And I, like so many people, very heavy, few years post, including 2020. Joy sort of seemed to seep out of my life. And then with long COVID, joy just disappeared completely. So finding this particular community, and Suzy talked earlier about some other support communities, and I have huge respect for them. And there's a time when they are really helpful.
Very helpful.
And they're doing incredible amounts of advocacy, incredible research, incredible, they're there for everybody. But I found it so triggering. And I didn't even know the word triggering before, by the way. I found it so triggering. I've been like, I'm never going to get well. I was like, no. I don't want to be, I'm not going to that place.
Yeah.
Because that is not possible for me to not ever be me again. So I need to find somewhere that gives me, gives me the hope. So you've got connection, community, you've got joy and silliness, you've got hope. And then what you start to get, because I not only am part of Suzy's RRR community, but I did one of the programs that Suzy runs called Fern, which is a very intimate 7-week long, real deep dive into some of the brain stuff, really, behavioral stuff, the brain retraining, the learning, getting some tools around how to calm down your system, your autonomic nervous system, calm it down to start to feel safe so that you can start to heal. Amazing program. I love it. I learned so much more again from that. And that's got another little community, what we call Fernies. We have our Fernie groups, and that persists. So one of the things that Suzy really encourages you to do if you're on that program is to stay in contact with people on your program. Yeah. We use WhatsApp. So here we go, social media. I hate it. I love it.
Yeah.
If I hadn't been on social media, on Facebook, I wouldn't have found Suzy.
No.
And everything that goes with that community. So me and my Fernies, every single day, one of the things you do is to go find joy. Yeah. Every single day. And you go share joy. Every single morning, I will open up my social media machine And one of
I
our
think it's called
fernies
a
is,
phone, Sue. It's okay to call
yes.
it a phone,
Oh,
babe.
it's a phone. Was that what it's called?
My social media machine.
My
I love
social
that.
media machine. And
Can I just say
yeah,
that phones used to just be for calling people?
yeah.
I don't do that
And
at
having been
all
in the
these days. No, I hate a phone
and
call.
I'm partially responsible, having been in the technology industry that developed these things. But anyway, one of my fernies is in Australia. So when I wake up in the morning, she has posted her joys from the day, and it's the first thing I see.
Lovely.
I see her, and she takes beautiful photographs of beautiful things, but they can also be just tiny things. But that whole discovery, and you know, a lot of people have done a lot of research on happiness and on gratitude and on the power of it. I was one of those people who would have said, "Oh, that's all a bit woo woo. Yeah, whatever. I'm going to just get on with being normal." I am now a person that I have gratitude. I've learnt gratitude. I've learnt to find joy. And again, that's hugely healing. Who knew that going and looking at a spot of rain on a leaf and going, wow, look at that's amazing. Look at it. You know, taking a photo and sharing it with a small group of people who've been through what you've been through and are going through what you're going through is actually part of my healing journey. But it really is. I can't tell you. I mean, you could tell how passionate I am about it, right? Because honestly, it's the thing that has made the difference to me. A, getting so much better than I was, and I'm not out of the woods, but I'm so much better than I was. B, not feeling alone anymore, and being able to say to my fellow fernies, I needed some inspiration today. Because again, one of the things we were encouraged not to do was not to do the hand wringing and, oh, hey, here's all my symptoms today. No, because we don't want to trigger everybody. So code, I need some inspiration today. How beautiful, right? And so having a group of people that I now have new friends.
You've found your tribe, and it's a new tribe because of a new phase in your life. And we have multiple phases in life. I found my young mum tribe, I had my school tribe, my uni tribe, my working tribe, and there's a tribe for every stage. It's just being open to finding them and then knowing your part in that, and it being, if you're lucky enough, you found one that is super nourishing and leaves you warmer, as they would say from my kids' junior school, it would leave you warm and fuzzy, not cold and prickly.
Yes.
And that is true. That is the way we want to feel when we have interactions, community, and share. And that stands for everyone in everything ultimately. And that's what I strive for as well. I have to admit, absolutely strive for. So listen, to wrap up, because I know we could talk forever. I'd love it if you both could think of a little bit of advice for someone who hasn't gone through the journey you have as positively, but is gripping on to the need for hope, and who wants to move forward but is struggling, and or someone who loves them and happens to listen to this and then thinks, how can I help? How can I nudge just to move them forwards? So I don't know who wants to go first. Suzy, maybe.
I'm going to go first, if that's okay. So I was reminded recently of the power of the stuff that I've got on my YouTube channel, which obviously I have very little interaction with once it's up there. But someone came up to me and said, "Are you Suzy Bolt? I just want to thank you." I was just walking the dog. So I want to thank you because I watched all the interviews that you did with those doctors, the cardiologists, etc., and that helped me learn about what was happening for me. And then I did some of the classes that you shared, the really gentle stuff on your channel, and it helped me get better. And I just want to say thank you. She said, I never joined your program. I never did that, but because I felt like I had what I needed. And she said, shall we hug? I was like, okay. And in that moment, I went, wow. You don't have to join, you don't have to pay, but you can just educate yourself. So start there. So if you are someone or someone who's going through this, there's so many brilliant information, kind of sort of educational talks now with doctors and people who are sort of shedding light on this. My channel is a good place to start. And then there's another guy, Jez Medinger. Go to some of his early stuff. Go have a look what he was talking about then. He goes off on all sorts of tangents, but, you know, stick with some of the early stuff. Learn about what's going on, and then learn about the fact that there are things that you can do. Then I would say one of the most important things, and this was why I set the whole thing up in the first place, my call, my healing call. And I think we all have a kind of inner siren healing call at some point when you tune in, and I'm quite tuned in. It went, connect with others. Do not try and do this on your own, because this is miserable. So I then went, the tribe that I want doesn't exist, because I want to have fun. And I know fun is the opposite of fear. Joy is the opposite of fear. And all I'm exposed to right now is fear and upset and rage and anger at the world. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create my own tribe. And if you are getting a calling for a tribe, find one or make your own. Literally, don't, you know, you can do what I did. You know, I am just a woman who set up a tribe because she wanted one, and I wanted it in a particular way. Anyone is capable of doing that, right? And I was the sickest I've ever been in my life. I was in a dark room, which is where phones come into their own, our social media machines, because they've got lights on them and you can work on them in bed. So find your tribe, educate yourself, connect, because if you're that isolated and you've lost so much of your identity, you need to get that bit back first, because healing isn't possible until you're a bit happier. So that's my offering to this space. Yeah. Sue, what's yours?
Well, other than just echoing that, amplifying the hell out of it, getting the world's biggest speakers and go and listen to that, I'd say the only thing I'd add to that is, because, by the way, that is exactly what I did. I was looking desperately for stuff. I actually started with Jez Medinger, got his book, watched a lot of his YouTube, but then he mentioned he had an interview with you, Suzy.
He mentioned
right?
me, yeah.
Or you had an interview with him, whichever way around it goes. And I thought, that woman, I'm going to find out more. I need to find out more. Googled Suzy Bolt, long COVID. Phew, a world of new information. Lots of that was really, really helpful to me. And that then led to me finding the programs, and I wanted to join. By the way, it's incredibly reasonable. I had to give up my job, so financially I have to be very careful. It's incredibly affordable. I'm just going to say that. That's advert over. I think the only other thing I'd say, Wendy,
can I just add one thing on that cost?
Go on.
I just wanted to say one thing on the price point there. If you're in the UK, we have now reached a point where if you speak to your social prescriber in your GP surgery, they can refer you to us, and we've created a fund to help a certain amount of people come in to access the program who are on low income support, etc. And you can join for £5 a week, right, with the on-demand library, or you're £9 with everything else. But if that's out of your reach, and it is for some people because they've lost everything, then we still have ways to get you in. So please just know that a price point should never be a barrier to you helping yourself get better. So thank you. I've just needed to say that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the only thing I'd add, Wendy, is, so if you're listening to this and you either know someone with long COVID or another invisible chronic illness, or you are yourself going through it and you are feeling so isolated and you have no answers and you're so frustrated with the medical community, it's not their fault. We agree this. Know that you are not alone. Know that there is a path out. There is a way to recover. Everyone's speed, everyone's path will be different. We'll meander in different ways, and we'll be going at different paces. But there is a way out. There really is a way out. And then go find the tribe. Go connect. It's just so cathartic to find even just one other person who gets it. You're like, yes, it's not just me. I'm not going mad. Because you can get gaslighted hugely with these types of illnesses. And even the strongest of spirits can get gaslighted, right? So, yeah, I'd say know that you can get better. Know that it's not about, don't do it on your own. There's so much out there now. I've discovered other things that can help me along the way, as well as Suzy's group and program, through the wonderful, resourceful people in that community. So you can go into all sorts of directions, but you can't do that all on your own. researching on your own in illness, trying to find answers will just take you backwards. So
it's exhausting.
the resources are there. Be kind to yourself. Accept you can't do it all on your own. Don't try and be so strong. You can do this all on your own, like I did for a long time.
Yeah.
Open up to the vulnerability. Open up to knowing there's help. Go find people who can help you, and know that you can get better, and you'll start to get better. And I am getting better, and it's amazing. I'm finding more of me.
Yes. And you're doing podcasts about it. Yeah. So this is the thing. It's so important. The reason that I do this podcast is to share people's messages, to learn more, to get information out there, lots of which I have no idea about, and I just want to learn more. And I think the more information share we can have, and the more support we can have, the better the world is. And so I thank you so much for your time sharing both your stories, Suzy, for the work you and your team have done. And, obviously Sue is a huge fan clearly of that, but Sue it wasn't actually Sue that suggested that you came on, Suzy. She mentioned you as part of her healing journey, and it was actually me that said, "Oh, shall we get her on as well?" So it's there's another link, another connection. So thank you so much, and I wish you both hugely well with your recovery. You're clearly doing really well and doing good work that other people need. So thank you both so much for your time.
Welcome. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Yes, thanks.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.